Have you ever stopped to consider that some of your quietest, most ordinary behaviors might actually reveal extraordinary strength? Not the kind of strength that comes from muscle or status, but the deeper kind, psychological resilience, a presence that changes the energy in a room, a capacity for life that most people will never even name. Carl Jung once said that most people do not recognize the symbols through which their unconscious expresses itself, and this includes the symbols of strength. You may think you're just getting through your day, simply surviving, simply doing what needs to be done. But in reality, you are leaving behind subtle markers of power, silent traces of courage and depth, the kind of signs that others notice even if you don't. What if the very things you dismiss as just me are exactly what show that you carry a strength most people can only dream of? Think about it. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to prove it. Deep strength doesn't shout. It whispers. It's not in the words you throw around, but in the silences you hold, the way you endure, the choices you make when nobody is watching. And yet, here's the irony. People with true strength almost never believe they have it. They assume they're just stubborn, or just different, or maybe even a little broken. But what if what you call broken is actually your deepest resilience? What if what you call stubborn is really the capacity to resist what does not align with your soul? Jung believed that the psyche often disguises its treasures in forms we misunderstand. What looks like weakness, when examined, reveals itself as power. Let me give you an image. Picture yourself walking into a room. You don't think of yourself as intimidating. You're just being you. But notice how others suddenly adjust. The way someone lowers their voice, the way another person straightens their posture, the way conversations shift ever so slightly. It's not because you said anything. It's because strength is felt before it is seen. You may not register it, but their bodies do. They sense your groundedness, your clarity, your refusal to play shallow games. And here's the part you probably haven't realized. The very things you downplay, your independence, your honesty, your ability to stay calm under pressure, these are the things that make people stop and take notice. They might not even be able to explain it. They just feel it, and sometimes they even fear it. Because deep strength unsettles those who rely on appearances. Jung wrote that what we deny in ourselves often becomes our fate. And many of us deny our strength, walking through the world as though we are fragile, when in truth we are carrying an indestructible core. Every scar you've hidden, every storm you've endured, every disappointment that failed to destroy you, that's strength. But because it's yours, you've grown so used to it that you can no longer see it clearly. That's what we're going to uncover together in this video. 5 things you do, small, ordinary things, that actually reveal a level of strength most people overlook. By the end, you'll see yourself differently, not because I will convince you of something foreign, but because I will show you what has been there all along. So, let me ask you, have you ever been told you seem calm even in chaos? Have you noticed that people come to you with their troubles even when you never ask to be the listener? Have you felt the sting of being misunderstood, criticized, or even resented for no reason at all? If so, you may already be carrying one of these signs of hidden strength. Stay with me, because once you recognize them, you'll understand why people react the way they do around you, why some admire you deeply, while others seem strangely uncomfortable in your presence. And you'll begin to see that what you've dismissed as just me is in fact the rare mark of someone who is far stronger than they realize. Have you ever noticed how, when everything around you is falling apart, you don't completely collapse with it? Maybe you still feel fear, maybe your chest tightens, your thoughts race, your heart beats faster. But even then, there's something in you that doesn't let go, something that anchors you. You keep moving, you keep showing up, you keep holding on, while others around you are already drowning. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious reveals itself most clearly in crisis. And in those moments of chaos, the way a person reacts tells you everything about the hidden structures of their psyche. For most people, panic overtakes reason. Fear silences their inner voice. But in a few individuals, something remarkable happens. Instead of breaking, they bend. Instead of disintegrating, they center. You might not even notice you're doing this because to you it feels normal. You think, I don't have another choice, I just keep going. But to everyone watching, it's extraordinary. Think of those times when someone else fell apart under pressure, and you were the one who remained composed. The one who thought clearly when others froze. The one who quietly carried responsibility when no one else could. That isn't luck. That's resilience. What's fascinating is how subtle this strength looks. It's not loud. It doesn't show up as grand heroics. It shows up in small, almost invisible ways. The way you take a deep breath before making a decision. The way you choose not to shout when others are already yelling. The way you carry on with what needs to be done, even when fear whispers that it's impossible. That is the kind of strength Jung would call archetypal. The timeless strength of the self emerging through you, even when your ego feels powerless. And here's something you may not have realized. People notice this calm in you, even when you don't. That's why others often turn to you in crisis. They may not say it out loud, but deep down, they sense your presence as a stabilizer. You become the ground beneath their feet when their own world feels like it's spinning. You might even feel burdened by it, wondering why so many rely on you, why chaos seems to find its way to you. But Jung would say, this is no accident. Your unconscious is projecting strength, and others are drawn to it like moths to a flame. But here's the paradox. Because your strength feels ordinary to you, you often dismiss it. You think, anyone would have done the same, but the truth is they wouldn't. Most people don't. Most people don't hold steady when the storm rages. Most people collapse into fear or denial. The fact that you didn't, the fact that you still move forward, is not normal. It is rare, and it is powerful. There's also another layer here. When you remain calm in chaos, it unsettles some people. They might even accuse you of being cold or detached. Why? Because your composure exposes their panic. Jung once said that what we dislike in others often reveals what we cannot accept in ourselves. Your ability to stay centered becomes a mirror that forces them to confront their lack of control. And for some, that is intolerable. So let me tell you this. The next time you find yourself calm when everyone else is in pieces, don't dismiss it. Don't shrink it down. Recognize it for what it is, a signal of deep strength. A mark of a psyche that has already endured storms and learned how to hold its ground. You may not see it in yourself, but others feel it. They rely on it, and it is one of the clearest signs that you are far stronger than you know. There's a certain kind of strength that often goes unnoticed because it looks so ordinary from the outside. It's the ability to walk alone, to choose your own path even when it doesn't match the expectations of your family, your friends, or society. To say no when everyone else says yes. To trust your own compass even when you're not sure where it will lead. Carl Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, requires periods of solitude. He knew that to discover who you really are, you must step away from the collective noise, the constant pressure to conform. But here's the thing, most people can't do it. The fear of being left out, rejected, or misunderstood is so strong that they would rather lose themselves than risk being alone. And yet, you've done it. Maybe not in dramatic ways. Maybe it shows up in the simple fact that you don't chase approval the way others do. You make choices that puzzle people, like staying home to work on something personal instead of going out just to fit in, or ending a relationship that looked fine on the surface but wasn't nourishing your soul. From the outside, people might say, "Why is she so distant? Why doesn't he just go along?" But what they don't realize is that your independence is not a flaw. It's evidence of an inner strength most never develop. Think back to moments in your life when you felt the sting of being misunderstood. Perhaps others called you cold, antisocial, stubborn, or even arrogant. They couldn't see that your refusal to follow the crowd was not pride, it was integrity. Jung said that the individual who follows their own path often becomes alien to the group because the group survives on sameness. But true growth requires difference. Your independence is not a rejection of others, it's a loyalty to yourself. And here's something even deeper. The courage to walk alone is rarely glamorous. It's often painful. There are nights when solitude feels heavy, when you question your own decisions, when you wonder if maybe they're right, maybe you are too much, or maybe you are not enough. But even in those moments of doubt, you keep walking. That is the essence of strength, not the absence of fear, but the decision to continue in spite of it. People often misunderstand independence because it unsettles them. When you don't rely on their approval, when you don't beg for their company, they lose their power over you. And power is something people rarely give up willingly. So instead they criticize, they gossip, they try to pull you back into the familiar patterns that make them feel safe. What they call arrogance is really your freedom. What they call detachment is really your clarity. Jung wrote that loneliness is not caused by a lack of people around us, but by the inability to express what matters most to us. And you've learned that some paths are too sacred to be shared with just anyone. Your independence is not about isolation, it's about preservation. You preserve your truth, your energy, your essence, until you find people capable of meeting you at that depth. So the next time you feel misunderstood for walking alone, remember this. Solitude is not weakness, it is preparation. Every step you take in independence is shaping you into someone who cannot be manipulated, cannot be broken by peer pressure, cannot be swayed by empty promises. Others may not see it, but in those quiet choices, you are displaying a strength far greater than the crowd's approval. And when you look back, you'll realize that the moments you thought were your most fragile, the moments you sat alone, uncertain and unseen, were in fact the moments where your deepest strength was being forged. Independence is not the absence of belonging, it is the presence of self. And that is a power most people will never have the courage to claim. There is a kind of strength that almost no one recognizes in themselves because when you're living it, it doesn't feel like strength at all. It feels like breaking. It feels like darkness, like loss, like pain so heavy you think you might not get through it. But what if I told you that the very fact that you've endured pain and not run from it proves a resilience so deep that others can't even imagine it? Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." He believed that our suffering isn't just random cruelty, it is the very soil out of which transformation grows. The people who seem unshaken on the surface often crumble the fastest when real challenges arrive. But the ones who've already faced storms, who've cried in silence, who've felt the weight of betrayal, loneliness, or failure, and still kept going, those are the ones who carry real strength. Think about the wounds you've lived through, the heartbreak that left you shattered, the friendship that ended suddenly, leaving you confused, the family struggles you never asked for but had to endure. At the time, you probably thought, "This will destroy me." But here you are. Maybe with scars, yes. Maybe still healing, but stronger, wiser, deeper. Pain has a way of remaking us. And here's the paradox. People looking at you now may only see your calm, your insight, your ability to handle life with quiet steadiness. They don't see the nights you lay awake replaying memories. They don't see the mornings you forced yourself to rise when all you wanted to do was hide. They don't see the cost. They just see the strength that came out of it. But you know the truth. Your strength was forged in fire. And though you may not realize it, your willingness to face pain instead of running from it sets you apart. Many people numb themselves with distractions, bury themselves in shallow relationships, hide behind busyness or denial. But you didn't. Or maybe you tried for a while, but eventually you turned toward the pain. You let it teach you. You let it shape you. That takes a kind of courage most people never find. Jung wrote that what we resist not only persists, it grows. When you resist pain, when you refuse to face it, it festers in the unconscious. It turns into bitterness, projection, cycles that repeat without explanation. But when you face it, when you say, yes, this hurts and I will walk through it, something changes. The wound becomes a doorway. The suffering becomes initiation. And you begin to see yourself not as a victim of fate, but as a participant in your own transformation. Think about how differently you respond now compared to who you were years ago. When conflict arises, you don't collapse as quickly. When someone disappoints you, it still stings, but you recover faster. When life throws you into uncertainty, you no longer feel as if the ground will swallow you whole. That's not luck. That's strength. That's the fruit of everything you've faced and survived. And yet, because pain is invisible when it's transformed, you may not give yourself credit. You may think, well, I'm just doing what anyone would do. But the truth is, most people avoid the kind of inner confrontation you've already had. Most people would rather stay asleep. But you have faced the dragon, and in doing so, you've become stronger than you know. Here's something else to consider. Others may sometimes mistake your depth for sadness or your silence for weakness. They may wonder why you're more reflective, why you don't rush into things the way they do. What they don't realize is that your scars have given you wisdom. You don't take things at face value anymore. You know how fragile life can be, how quickly it can all change. And instead of making you bitter, it has made you stronger. So when you look at your wounds and think of them as signs of failure, stop. They are evidence of your strength. They are proof that you've lived, that you've endured, that you've transformed. You may not see it as clearly as others do, but the way you carry your pain quietly, with dignity, with the courage to keep moving forward, is one of the strongest signals of resilience a human being can give. And Jung would remind you of this. The shadow is not something to be destroyed, but something to be integrated. Your pain is not your enemy. It is your teacher. And by facing it, you've already revealed more strength than you realize. There is a kind of strength that rarely gets celebrated because it doesn't make headlines, and it doesn't usually win you applause. In fact, it often costs you relationships, opportunities, and even comfort. It's the strength of honesty, the ability to speak truth when silence would be easier. The courage to stand by your values even when you know others may turn against you. Carl Jung wrote that every act of truth-telling is an act of individuation. It's a moment when the authentic self speaks louder than the mask we wear for society. And because society survives on masks, on politeness, on avoidance, on pretending everything is fine, your honesty can feel disruptive, even dangerous. But that disruption is precisely what makes it powerful. Think about the times in your life when you told the truth, even though it scared you. Maybe you admitted to someone you loved that the relationship wasn't working. Maybe you told a friend that their behavior was hurting you. Maybe you admitted to yourself that the life you were living was not the life you wanted. In those moments, your voice may have shaken, your hands may have trembled, but you spoke anyway. That is strength. Not the kind that gets recognition, but the kind that builds a foundation you can actually stand on. What most people don't realize is how much energy dishonesty consumes. Keeping up appearances, hiding your feelings, living in contradiction, it slowly drains you. Jung believed that the unconscious always demands truth. When you ignore it, it shows up as anxiety, depression, or emptiness. But when you align your outer words and actions with your inner reality, something powerful happens. You reclaim your energy. You stop leaking power into maintaining illusions, and you begin living with integrity. Of course, honesty often makes people uncomfortable. When you say no to something everyone else is saying yes to, they might call you difficult. When you refuse to flatter, to gossip, to play along with shallow games, they might call you cold or arrogant. But what's really happening is that your truth is showing them something about themselves. Jung said that what irritates us in others often reveals what we are avoiding in ourselves. Your honesty doesn't just speak about you, it shines a light on the shadows others are desperate to keep hidden. And here's where your hidden strength becomes most visible. You are willing to pay the price of truth. You're willing to be disliked, to be misunderstood, even to be rejected if it means staying real. Most people aren't. Most people would rather betray themselves than risk betraying others' expectations. But you don't. And that is strength of the rarest kind. Think of it this way. Honesty is not just about words. It's about how you live. Every time you make a choice that aligns with your values instead of the crowd, you're practicing truth. Every time you admit to yourself what you really feel, even if no one else knows it, you're practicing truth. Every time you refuse to wear a mask just to be accepted, you're practicing truth. And each of those moments is a small act of courage that builds into something extraordinary. Of course, being honest doesn't mean being harsh. Jung emphasized that the goal of individuation is not to attack others with your truth, but to live it. Sometimes the most powerful honesty is quiet, a gentle number, a simple refusal, a boundary drawn with calm but firm words. Strength doesn't always roar, it often whispers. But even in its softness, it carries immense power. And here's something you might not realize. Your honesty inspires others. Even when they resist it, even when they criticize you, deep down, they remember it. They see someone willing to be authentic, and it plants a seed. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day they will realize that your refusal to lie, your insistence on being real, was not a threat, but an invitation for them to do the same. So the next time you doubt yourself for being too direct or too honest, stop. Remember that honesty is not a flaw, it's a form of strength that protects your soul from corrosion. It may cost you in the short term, but in the long term, it gives you the one thing you can't buy back, a life that belongs to you. Jung would say this is the essence of authenticity, to speak truth even when it isolates you, to live in alignment even when it costs you approval. And that strength, though you may not always see it, is one of the rarest and most powerful you possess. There is a kind of strength that almost no one talks about because it doesn't look like power from the outside. It doesn't come with a loud voice or a firm command or an obvious act of courage. It comes quietly in the way you care, in the way you notice others' struggles when no one else does, in the way you show up for people even when you're exhausted, even when you don't have all the answers, even when you're not sure they'll ever thank you for it. Carl Jung wrote that the soul is nourished not only by independence and self-realization, but by connection, by our ability to touch and be touched by the lives around us. And compassion, he believed, is not weakness, but one of the highest expressions of psychological maturity. Why? Because true compassion requires you to have faced your own shadow. It requires you to have felt pain, disappointment, and fear. And instead of letting it harden you, you chose to remain open. Think about that for a moment. Most people who have suffered use their suffering as an excuse to close off. They build walls. They stop trusting. They protect themselves by refusing to care. But you didn't. You kept your heart open. And that, though you may not see it, is a staggering kind of strength. Maybe you've been told you're too sensitive. Maybe people have dismissed your compassion as naivete, as if caring deeply makes you weak. But what they don't understand is that compassion without boundaries is weakness. Compassion with boundaries, the kind you're learning to embody, is power. It means you can care without being consumed, you can give without losing yourself, you can empathize without allowing others to exploit that empathy. And that balance is something only strong souls achieve. Consider the times when you've listened to someone's pain, even though you were carrying your own. Or when you forgave someone, not because they deserved it, but because you refused to let resentment poison your spirit. Or when you extended kindness to a stranger, not for recognition, not for gain, but simply because you couldn't ignore the humanity in front of you. These small acts may have gone unnoticed by others, but they are proof of an inner resilience that is rare in this world. Jung said that the person who integrates their own wounds develops the capacity to heal others simply by being present. Your compassion is not just kindness. It is a signal to the world that you have faced pain, and instead of turning it into bitterness, you transformed it into understanding. That is strength. And yet, compassion can feel heavy. You might wonder sometimes if caring so much makes you vulnerable. Maybe you've been hurt by people who took advantage of your generosity. Maybe you've given second chances when you shouldn't have, and later blamed yourself for being too soft. But here's what you need to remember. Compassion doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It doesn't mean letting yourself be drained. True compassion is knowing when to step in and when to step back. It's the ability to love others without abandoning yourself. And that ability is exactly what reveals the depth of your strength. Think of it this way. Anyone can be kind when it's easy. Anyone can be generous when they have plenty to give. But it takes strength to remain compassionate when life has scarred you. It takes strength to show gentleness in a world that rewards hardness. It takes strength to extend patience to others when you could just as easily turn away. And here's the irony. People often mistake your compassion for weakness, when in reality, it is evidence of your power. Because only the strong can remain soft. Only the secure can afford to be gentle. Only the resilient can risk vulnerability. What looks like tenderness is in fact one of the clearest signs of inner toughness. So the next time you doubt yourself for caring too much, pause. Recognize that your compassion is not a liability. It is a rare and powerful strength. One that Jung would say is essential not only for your individuation, but for the healing of those around you. Because the world is full of people desperate for someone to truly see them, and when you extend compassion wisely, with boundaries, with awareness, you are offering exactly what they cannot give themselves. And that, though you may not always see it, makes you far stronger than you know. There is a strength that rarely gets recognized because it doesn't look like the kind of strength people are trained to admire. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it doesn't show up in achievements or trophies. It shows up in silence, in the way you endure difficult moments without making a spectacle of them, in the way you carry private battles that no one else even knows you're fighting, in the way you rise every morning after nights that tried to break you. Carl Jung wrote that the soul grows most quietly in its darkest hours. He believed that transformation happens not in the spotlight of applause, but in the solitude of endurance. And you know this truth intimately, even if you've never put it into words, because you've lived it. Think of the times when you felt completely invisible in your struggle. Maybe you held back tears in front of others because you didn't want to burden them. Maybe you endured financial, emotional, or personal hardships without announcing it to the world. Maybe you rebuilt yourself quietly after a loss, after heartbreak, after disappointment. And though no one praised you for it, though no one cheered you on, you still survived. That is strength, the kind that doesn't need witnesses to be real. Society often glorifies resilience only when it comes with a story that can be told, a victory that can be displayed. But the truth is that the deepest resilience is invisible. It is forged in the countless small decisions to keep going when giving up would be easier. It is built in the private discipline of choosing to heal, to forgive, to move forward, even when no one sees, no one thanks you, and no one even knows. Jung observed that this kind of hidden strength is archetypal. It connects to the image of the wounded healer, the one who carries pain, transforms it silently, and later uses it as wisdom. You may not realize it, but your quiet endurance has already become a source of healing. Because the strength you built in silence radiates in ways others can feel, even if they can't explain it. People sense it in your presence, in your steadiness, in the way you carry yourself. Without ever telling your story, you transmit the energy of survival. And here's the paradox. Because no one sees your resilience, you may sometimes believe it doesn't count. You may think, I'm just surviving. I'm not doing anything extraordinary. But that's not true. The fact that you endured without recognition, without applause, without validation, that is exactly what makes it extraordinary. Strength that depends on applause isn't strength. Strength that exists even in silence is unshakable. Think of how many times you've had to smile when you didn't feel like smiling. How many times you showed up to work, to family, to obligations, carrying more weight than anyone could see. How many times you swallowed fear and doubt just to keep moving forward. Each of those moments was a silent act of resilience. And when you add them together, they reveal a person of immense inner power. Jung believed that the soul remembers every silent act of strength. Even if the world forgets, even if no one notices, your unconscious holds on to it. And it shapes you. It gives you a quiet confidence, a knowing that no matter what happens, you have already survived worse. That is why resilience in silence is so powerful. It becomes part of your very being. Others may misjudge you. They may think your life looks easy because they didn't see the nights of struggle. They may think you're calm because you've never shown them your storms. But you and your soul know the truth, and that truth is enough. Because resilience is not for display, it is for survival, and your survival, your persistence, your refusal to be broken, is proof of a strength so deep that most people will never understand it. So the next time you doubt yourself, remember this. The silent battles you've fought, the storms you've endured, the tears you've wiped alone, they count. They matter. They reveal a strength far greater than words, because it is the kind of strength that doesn't need to be seen to be real. There is one final strength you carry, one that is so subtle you might never call it strength at all. It's not the strength to endure, or to be honest, or even to care for others. It is the strength to keep growing, the willingness to look at yourself again and again and say, I can become more. The refusal to stay trapped in old versions of yourself, even when those versions feel safe. The courage to evolve, even when no one asks you to. Carl Jung believed that the process of individuation, the unfolding of the true self, is a lifelong journey. It doesn't end at 30 or 50 or even 80. As long as you breathe, your soul is calling you to grow. And most people resist this call. They settle into patterns, into roles, into identities that feel comfortable. They stop questioning, stop searching, stop changing. But not you. You are still willing to learn, to unlearn, to step into the unknown. And that is strength of the rarest kind. Think about it. How many times have you surprised yourself by shedding an old skin? How many times have you walked away from a chapter you thought would define you forever? How many times have you reimagined what your life could be, even when others said you were too late, too old, too foolish to change? Those moments of growth reveal more strength than any victory you could display to the world. Because growing means leaving behind what is familiar. It means facing fear, uncertainty, and discomfort. It means admitting, I don't know what comes next, but I trust myself enough to find out. Most people mistake consistency for strength. They believe staying the same is proof of stability. But Jung would say the opposite. He taught that real strength is fluid, adaptable, always transforming. Because the unconscious keeps unfolding, the soul keeps speaking, and if you have the courage to listen, you will never stop becoming. Of course, growth is not glamorous. It doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like chaos. Sometimes it looks like confusion, like starting over, like losing yourself just to discover who you really are. But hidden inside all that struggle is a rare kind of resilience. The strength to surrender to change, even when you don't understand it. The strength to trust that transformation is not destroying you, but building you. And here's what makes your strength so profound. You grow not because someone forces you, not because circumstances demand it, but because your inner voice refuses to let you stay small. You may not always hear it clearly, but it guides you. It whispers in moments of restlessness. It nudges you when something no longer feels right. It stirs in your chest when you know there is more waiting for you. And when you listen, even a little, you honor that strength. This is why, even if you don't see it, people notice something powerful about you. They see someone who doesn't get stuck, someone who refuses to shrink, someone who continues to evolve when others have already given up on themselves. And whether they admire it or fear it, they cannot ignore it. Because growth is magnetic. It reveals life, movement, energy. And energy like that cannot be faked. So if you ever wonder whether you are strong, remember this. Strength is not just lifting burdens or standing tall in crisis. Strength is continuing to grow when you could just as easily stop. It is choosing the unknown over the familiar. It is saying yes to life again and again, even when it scares you. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and you are living that privilege, quietly, courageously, in ways you may not always notice, but that shape everything about you." So let this be your reminder. The fact that you are still becoming, still questioning, still reaching for more, that alone proves your strength. And no matter what anyone else says, no matter how invisible it may feel, this strength will carry you forward into the life you are meant to live. Because strength is not about endings, it is about beginnings. And as long as you are willing to keep growing, your strength will never run out.